first thing, especially for northern and western England, Wales, southern Scotland. Quite quickly the cloud will build and it will tend to fill in, so a rather cloudy afternoon, broken areas of cloud and a few showers. Many places avoiding them though, and 22 to 24 Celsius in the south, 18 to 21 in the north. So feeling pleasant with the lighter winds and where we do get some bright spells, but certainly no return of last week's heat on the horizon. Now into Thursday morning, early hours, we'll see thicker cloud across some central parts of the UK. Areas of rain or showers here. Either side of that, some clear spells, but with a cloudier night on the whole, it's a milder night. Temperatures in some urban areas not tipping below 16 Celsius. Now the cloud and the showers across North Wales, North Midlands into northern England continues to march north during Thursday morning. Cloud builds elsewhere and further showers will bubble up in places, but there'll also be some sunshine coming through. And Friday sees further showers in the north and the west, likewise on Saturday, but at the same time it will turn warmer.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, did Rishi Sunak's turn as a schoolyard bully in last night's nasty BBC showdown prove he's unfit for number 10?
Down in 3 years.
Liz, that's simply not right. You promised almost... Well, let's just take on this, right? So we remember...
If we follow Rishi's plans, we are headed for a recession.
Can we really get an answer to this question?
And your own...
Team Trust have slammed Sunak's incessant interruptions and aggressive, quote, mansplaining as unbecoming and a gift to Labour. I'll explain in my digest next why we saw the true colours of Fishy Rishi, then my superstar panel weigh-in. Tonight, I'm joined by former editor, current columnist at the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, former London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Before taking on Trust, teetotal Sunak was down the local pulling pints for a cringeworthy photo op. But why is his copycat man in the pub routine failing to boost his ailing campaign? Well, the politician, he's trying to imitate Britain's bona fide everyman Nigel Farage delivers his scathing verdict on Sunak's pitiful pint parody at 9:40. On the eve of another crippling rail walkout, Truss has vowed to strike at the heart of union power and stop Marxist barons holding the country to ransom. But will her Thatcherist crackdown be enough to derail the militant unions? We'll debate that at 10. What is to blame for the Dover chaos? Is it France or Brexit? Well, international security and border control expert Henry Bolton challenged Simon Calder to a debate after the travel journalist claimed on GB News that our decision to vote leave is responsible for those queues. We've given them the perfect arena to do battle in what promises to be a super clash at 9:25. As Stonewall is condemned by MPs and campaigners for suggesting children as young as 2 years old could be trans, is it time politicians finally get tough on extremist ideology? Olympic swimmer Sharron Davies has suffered financially because of her brave campaigning for women's rights, but that won't stop her fighting for females in the gender wars. She unpacks this latest outrage in The Outsider at 9:50. Is the BBC ageist and sexist? Radio 6 DJ Liz Kershaw hits out at the corporation for dumping her after 35 years, claiming they want to erase any woman over 60 from the airwaves. She's uncancelled at 10:40. After an American theatre bows to the woke mob and cancels a Dave Chappelle show over this joke.
But I know that trans people make up words to win arguments.
Does that spineless decision prove that artists need to unite to defeat cancel culture? Former Mumford & Sons member turned podcaster Winston Marshall launches defence of freedom of speech live in the studio at 10:20. Is a UK military fitness chief right that it's unacceptable for soldiers and coppers to be fat? And is the body positivity movement doing more harm than good? Plus, rack off, they're not really axing Neighbours, are they?
Might be leaving the street, but we're always going to be in each other's lives.
Always.
A special preview of the final episode with Kylie and Jason back in Ramsey Street. That's later. In the Media Buzz, you'll also get a first look at tomorrow's newspapers hot off the press, and as ever, a brand new Greatest Britain and Union Jackass crowned before the night is out. This is Dan Wootton tonight. Let's go. Just one thing first, though. The Boris on the ballot petition has hit 12,000, with grassroots Tories continuing to back the campaign to force a vote on whether he should continue as Prime Minister. But if this viral video is to be believed, Mr Johnson is already preparing for life after Downing Street.
He's f***ing bumped into old Boris Johnson, look. Give us a smile, Boris. Give us a smile, Boris. Come on, Boris. Oh, boy.
Yep, that's apparently the PM behind the wheel. Number 10 don't know when it was filmed, but come on, let's have another look. I loved it.
He's f***ing bumped into old Boris Johnson, look. Give us a smile, Boris. Give us a smile, Boris. Come on, Boris. Oh, boy.
See, he'll be fine without those chauffeured limos. In my digest in just a moment, why I think fishy Rishi Sunak blew his chance to replace Boris last night. Then my superstar panel weigh in tonight. Dawn Neeson of the Daily Star is here. So too Conservative politician Sean Bailey and the author and journalist Rebecca Reid. But first time, I'm very excited to welcome a special friend of the show to our news desk. So Bethany Elsey, she began her career at GB News as a producer on this show. Can you believe it? I claim full credit for all of her success, but now she brings you the news.
Dan, thank you very much, and good evening to you. I am Bethany Elsey, here to get you up to date from the GB newsroom. The latest Conservative Party leadership debate between Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss came to an abrupt end this evening after a medical incident in the studio. Talk TV released a statement to say that the host of the debate, Kate McCann, fainted while on air. The broadcaster says she's fine, but that the medical advice was to not continue with the debate. The International Monetary Fund is predicting the UK is set to have the weakest economy in the G7 next year. They expect Britain's economic growth to expand by just 0.5% due to rampant inflation, which would be the worst performance among all major economies except for Russia. It comes as the IMF warned that stalling growth across the world means we could be teetering on the edge of a global recession. Network Rail is advising people not to travel by train tomorrow unless absolutely necessary due to another day of strikes. More than 40,000 members of the RMT union and 14 train operators will walk out in a dispute over jobs, pay and conditions. Network Rail says only 20% of services will run and some places will have no trains at all. To minimise disruption, it's published a special timetable ahead of time, showing many trains will start later and finish earlier. Foreign Secretary and Tory leadership candidate Liz Truss says she doesn't support the action.
I would legislate to make sure there are essential services on our railway. It is completely wrong that the travelling public are being held ransom by militant unions. We can't allow that to happen. We need to make sure our essential services run.
People in England are being urged to use water wisely as the country faces drought in August. The Environment Agency is warning the dry conditions have been exacerbated by record high temperatures and lower than normal rainfall so far this year. Most of England has moved into prolonged dry weather status and is now taking precautionary measures to mitigate the impacts. On TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Let's get back to Dan.
Just 50 minutes into last night's disastrous BBC leadership debate where law and order, immigration, the Channel crisis, grooming gangs, the rights of women, the future of the licence fee, and even the NHS were virtually ignored. Just 50 minutes in, a spokesman for Liz Truss issued this comment to the political editor of the Times newspaper. Rishi Sunak has tonight proven he is not fit for office. His aggressive mansplaining and shouty private school behaviour is desperate, unbecoming and is a gift to Labour. Now, usually I'd think such spin was hyperbole. But I went back after the show last night and watched the entire unedifying spectacle. Sunak was arrogant, smug and rude. He showed his true colours, like a spoilt rich kid. He knew that by shouting and hollering over his opponent and the moderator, he would get his way. This is not a man I want in charge of the country. Now, if you think I'm exaggerating, well, have a look at this.
Not putting it on the Never Never. I would start paying it down in 3 years.
Liz, that's simply not right. You promised almost 40...
Under my plans, we will...
Well, let's just take on this, right? So we remember the 80s and the 90s. So just think what that means for all of your mortgages. Everyone watching. Right,
Can you let me respond?
That would be thousands of pounds.
At a time when there is a global economic crisis, to the same level as France's corporation tax.
Economic advisor. Let's just
negative, declinist language.
It's your own
that we're
economic
hearing.
advisor, Liz. It's not mine.
If we follow Rishi's plans, we are headed for a recession.
Can we really get an answer to this question?
Your own.
So, Liz, this is the problem with your plan. It's going to push people into
please let Liz Truss answer. Please let her answer.
When inflation gets out of control, interest rates go up.
Rishi
That's what
Sunak,
happens.
please let Liz Truss answer.
And that hard-working taxpayers who do the right thing have seen their taxes rise, despite the fact that we promised in our manifesto not to do it.
Hang on, Faisal.
I think that is what is wrong.
You know what? You were right then. And you're wrong now. It's the right Conservative logic for how to manage the economy.
I did
That's
say
what
that,
you said
and under my plan,
That's her answer.
Under my plan, Sophie, we want to get those EU regulations off the statute books. That's something that the Treasury has resisted.
You know what, Liz? You talk about bean counting. You talk about bean counting.
We haven't done the things like Solvency II, MiFID, that would have unlocked investment into our country.
Can I just ask, does anyone put their hands up? Does anyone know what Solvency II means?
I want to turbocharge that.
Whoa. So while Sunak became increasingly desperate with that sort of schoolboy behaviour, there were two moments where Truss absolutely owned him. Here's the first.
As recently as a month ago, you were pushing for closer trade relationships with China. This is not something you've advocated in government. I'm delighted that you've come round to my way of thinking, but it's been driven by the Foreign Office, the toughest stance we've taken on China.
Do you notice there? Not one interruption. I guess he knew he'd just been exposed. Then it came to the all-important matter of the economy and tax cuts. It was this comparison to a former Labour Prime Minister that I think was another standout moment for Truss.
Because I'm prepared to take on the orthodoxy The reality here is this is the same line that we heard from Gordon Brown when he was in the Treasury, the same line being repeated.
Well, hang on.
Now, look, as Westminster establishment outlet Politico's Andrew MacDonald wrote this morning, critics who wrote off the Foreign Secretary as wooden and error-prone early in the contest have been forced to eat their words. And while the Truss-hating sections of the MSM don't want to accept that the debate was a slam dunk for the Foreign Secretary, Truss not only clearly won among Tory members, she bettered Sunak on every single issue, from Ukraine to the cost of living to Boris Johnson to tax to Brexit. But the biggest loser last night, the biggest loser by far, was the BBC, which devoted precious minutes to rows over clothing rather than the important issues facing this country. As my colleague, the GB News presenter Alistair Stewart, who actually hosted the first ever general election leaders debate for ITV in 2010, as he wrote in a column for Spiked Online tonight, the low point was the nonsense about sartorial matters. Far too much time was wasted on questions about everything from Rishi's fine suits and loafers to Liz's earrings. The segment was prompted by remarks from Boris Johnson loyalist Nadine Dorries, who, sniping from the sidelines, had become something of a thing on social media earlier that day. But the BBC should have risen above it, not capitalised on it. Last night's debate was a golden opportunity for the national broadcaster to repair its damaged reputation for authority and impartiality. It gave it the chance, having seen Channel 4 and ITV's efforts, to give a kind of this is how you do it lesson. Instead, the debate was given an ill-conceived format, and at times the BBC even appeared to demonstrate a preference for Sunak. Alistair Stewart is right. Of course the BBC, just like the rest of the establishment and the MSM, are in the tank for Sunak, which is even more reason to trust Truss. To respond now, my superstar panel: former editor, current columnist at the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson; former Tory London mayoral candidate, Sharron Davies; and the author and journalist, Rebecca Reid. So, Dawn Neeson, what did you think of Sunak's unbecoming display last night?
Well, he managed to talk down to Liz Truss as only a man of 5'6" can, really. I think...
Dawn, we're not getting personal here.
Yes, I am, actually. Because he was getting personal, wasn't he? And this is what I find with both of them, to be honest with you. I don't want this, Dan. I want to hear about their policies. I want to come away from a debate knowing where they stand on the important issues we're all worried about. And I still have no idea. I know how much his suits cost, I know how much her earrings cost, and I know that he can talk down over people, and that Liz, to be fair, I still don't think she's very good in front of the camera. Not that it matters for a prime minister.
She was much better, though, wasn't she?
She was much better. She is getting better, and she's talking shallowly, as the BBC were doing. She's also looking much better. However, I just want to know what their policies are, and all I'm concerned about is that they're imploding before my eyes. It's just childish. It's pathetic. In particular, Rishi, and I'm not a fan of either of them, to be honest with you. And I just despair that we've come down to these two people. There has to be someone better, surely.
Sean, I don't really like the term mansplaining. I'll tell you why, because I actually hate playing identity politics.
He's going to mansplain why he hates it.
No, Rebecca, I'm not saying that. I hate identity politics. No. I hate identity politics. I don't think this has anything to do with the fact it was a man interrupting a woman. I just thought it was rude, full stop, regardless of sex.
Look, it's poor manners, isn't it? And actually, a lot of people who don't follow politics day to day, that's the kind of thing they pay more attention to than people would imagine. But actually, I blame Channel 4. It goes all the way back to the Channel 4 debate when they made it an adversarial. And what both candidates should do should take a step back and actually think of who's the audience here. The audience is the public and, in particular, Conservative members. And what Conservative members are interested in is two things. Are you loyal? Are you Conservative? People have been saying that this shows that Rishi's unfit for leadership. Most Conservative members I've spoken to have said he's unfit for leadership because of the way he sniped Boris Johnson and the fact that when it came to furlough, for instance, he didn't reclaim the money that was fraudulently taken. These things are more important than if his suit cost £3,000 or whatever it was. And I think Rishi's team need to get him in a corner and say, take a deep breath, calm down. You are the underdog for a good reason. Show what you've got. Don't come out and have a scrap. Nobody's interested in a scrap.
Do you know what, though, Sean? You were so right on that Channel 4 debate. Because why on earth, I said it before, I actually said it the night before, why on earth did the candidates agree to speak to a biased broadcast like Channel 4 when they could have had a debate with a properly impartial broadcaster like Alistair Stewart here at GB News. That was a huge strategic
It was more
error.
important that they set them at each other's throat. And what they
Of course.
I've been
that was
there
Christian
myself.
Guru-Murthy.
I've been there myself. It's harder to do when you're in position. But what they should have realised, look, if the Americans have taught us anything, if you have a prolonged period of attacking each other, when you then go back to dealing with the opposition, they have so much ammo.
Of course.
They shouldn't behave like that.
Of course, Rebecca Reid, you've got quite a different take on this, though, so I'm interested to hear it. You think that actually Liz Truss showed a lack of resilience last night.
I truly do. And I said, I think about 4 or 5 months ago, we were talking about Liz Truss, and I said, and I'm not sure I expressed it as I wanted to, if you are a woman who is taking on that job, you've got to be not as good as men, you've got to be better. Because when you sit across from Putin, if that happens, Putin isn't going to say, sorry, here you go, you talk. The fact that she couldn't handle herself, I could have handled myself, Dawn could have handled myself, every woman...
But she did
every
handle
woman
herself.
No, she let him talk over her constantly.
I don't think she did either, I agree.
She didn't. And honestly,
So you think she should have interrupted him and said,
100%.
shut up, Sunak, listen to me?
You see me and other women and other people do this every single week. If Calvin talks over me, I talk over Calvin. Sorry, Calvin, we miss you. If you are a woman and every woman I know has been talked over in a meeting or in a professional setting, you learn to stand up for yourself. And she just let him do it. It
But
was
Rebecca,
pathetic.
can I tell you why I completely disagree? Because she acted statesmanlike.
No, she didn't. She
and she
wouldn't. He trumped her on so many points.
She exposed his bad behaviour, and she allowed him to strangle himself, and he did.
But what you remember when you watch it was the person who said the most things, and it was Rishi who said the most things. In those clips that you showed just then, you cut it before the China thing. For instance, he came back and said, "You said a month ago we were going to have a golden age of relationships with China." He trounced her on every point. She was wooden and awkward.
I tell you why you're wrong. I tell you why you're wrong. Nobody likes a smart ass.
For the Prime Minister, I do.
No, I'm afraid. No. You might like a smart person. You don't like a smart ass. What people take away is a feeling. Wasn't it Maya Angelou who said they'll never remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel?
Yeah. But Rishi made me feel like he was competent.
I think Rishi got the feel wrong. You may support Rishi, you may support Liz, but in that moment, if I was advising Rishi, as someone who's done this before, I'd use the words wind your neck in.
But Dawn, this is one of the fascinating things that's happening, though, with this debate. It's the left who actually do prefer Rishi Sunak. And I know some folk would say that means he's more electable, but actually at this point it doesn't matter. It is up to Conservative Party members, and they, last night on every single point, said that Truss thrashed Sunak.
Liz is certainly favourite, and it was interesting, the debate that was Semi had tonight on another channel. I thought Rishi's team had tried to rein him in. The first 10 minutes of that, he was much calmer. He was much more considerate towards Liz, and she was. It was more comfortable to watch. But I don't know if you share this feeling, but personally, and I am a career feminist. That is literally how I became a journalist. I find it frustrating.
You're a feminist journalist.
That's my whole job. My whole job as being a feminist. It is the thing I care about most in the world, apart from my child. But when women like Liz Truss use words like mansplaining, and that's not the context of mansplaining. Mansplaining is when a man explains something to you that you know better than he does. That's not what's happening. That was a debate. I think, do you know what? Screw you, because you've done nothing for feminism, and you're invoking feminism now when it's convenient.
Liz Truss, the female foreign secretary who has stood up for the rights of women as the Equalities Minister, has done nothing for women.
What did she do as Equalities Minister? What did she actually do for women?
The first thing she did was actually define what a woman was and push back against the absolute extremism of the trans lobby and Stonewall.
She doesn't care about that. All she cares about is the attention. She genuinely does.
You know what?
She wasn't talking about it before this. She didn't even talking about it. It's been a winning thing.
I have to say,
she insisted on staying as Equalities Minister, as Foreign Secretary, because she was so passionate about protecting the rights of women. So I think
I fundamentally disagree.
Far be it from me to defend Liz. As a minister, as a Secretary of State, you have to be interested in what's happening at the time. You may have lots of things you're interested in that you're pushing in the background, but you'll always look like you're interested in the latest thing.
But
that is your job.
She didn't have to stay Minister for Equalities. She's Foreign Secretary. She did because she is so passionate about standing up for women's rights. So I think, Rebecca, you need to have a good look into
The one thing I admired Liz for was when they were talking about Project Fear, and she actually turned and she said, maybe I've learnt my lesson.
Yes, that was good.
And very rarely do you hear anybody.
Do you know what? I absolutely love a Remainer. I love it when Remainers admit voting to remain, voting to stay in the European Union was the biggest mistake of my life.
She also
Rebecca,
said,
do you feel that?
I didn't vote, I didn't care.
No, I remember that. I remember that.
But also I was drunk.
I remember that. You were refused.
No, I was like 22 and I was drunk and I didn't care.
No,
but I would say what she also said was, I know I'm not the best speaker. And I think that's the most powerful thing she could have said.
Yeah. Humility.
She's not.
Humility. And we saw none of that from Fishy Wishy. Rebecca Reid, Sean Bailey, Dawn Neeson, my superstar panel, they're here all night. But coming up before taking on trust, teetotal Rishi was spotted down the pub pulling pints. Now, the politician he's trying to imitate, Britain's real everyman, Nigel Farage, is here to deliver his verdict on Sunak's pale ale invitation. That's at 9:40. But up next in the clash, is French incompetence or Brexit to blame for the Dover delays? International security and border control expert Henry Bolton took exception to travel journalist Simon Calder's viral verdict that our freedom from the EU is to blame for the queues. And they're going to go head-to-head next. But who do you think is to blame? Is it France? Is it Macron? Or is it the fact that we voted to leave the EU? Email me, Dan at gbnews.uk. Tweet me using the handle at gbnews. We've got a poll running there too. Back in just a couple of minutes.
Hi there. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. After a relatively cloudy day in many places, there'll be an increased chance of clear spells developing overnight, and under those clear skies it will feel cool. Still 1 or 2 showers around as we end the day and go into Wednesday, but on the whole, high pressure is building in from the west, and that means winds are lighter and skies are getting clearer compared with earlier in the week. So actually, the best of the clear spells overnight will be across Western England, central Scotland, parts of Wales. There will be some areas of cloud elsewhere and continued showers for the north of Scotland as well as parts of eastern England. But under clear skies, well, many places will see temperatures dip into the low double figures or even the high single figures. A more comfortable night for sleeping and a fresh start to Wednesday. Plenty of sunshine around first thing, especially for northern and western England, Wales, southern Scotland. Quite quickly the cloud will build and it will tend to fill in, so a rather cloudy afternoon, broken areas of cloud and a few showers. Many places avoiding them though, and 22 to 24 Celsius in the south, 18 to 21 in the north. So feeling pleasant with the lighter winds and where we do get some bright spells, but certainly no return of last week's heat on the horizon. Now into Thursday morning, early hours, we'll see thicker cloud across some central parts of the UK. Areas of rain or showers here. Either side of that, some clear spells, but with a cloudier night on the whole, it's a milder night. Temperatures in some urban areas not tipping below 16 Celsius. Now the cloud and the showers across North Wales, North Midlands into northern England continues to march north during Thursday morning. Cloud builds elsewhere and further showers will bubble up in places, but there'll also be some sunshine coming through. And Friday sees further showers in the north and the west, likewise on Saturday, but at the same time it will turn warmer.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Stand by for Nigel Farage, but it's time now for The Clash. Now, the weekend of gridlock for holidaymakers travelling through Dover has raised questions about whether French President Emmanuel Macron is still trying to punish the UK for Brexit. And in the leadership debate last night, both Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak were adamant that the blame does not lie on this side of the channel.
We have a few quick-fire questions, yes or no, quite simple, because we're running out of time. First of all, those huge queues that we have seen over the weekend in Dover, in Folkestone, is Brexit to blame for those queues? Yes or no?
No.
Categorical.
But Simon Calder, the country's top travel journalist, has gone massively viral because of this appearance on GB News at the weekend, where he claimed that the queues were solely down to Brexit.
Because some of the ideas that this is all the French and they could just wave us through, that is absolutely not the case. And it's quite interesting that, the government will be delighted with this headline from the front page of the Sunday Times: French insistence on passport stamp causing holiday chaos. British insistence on passport stamp causing holiday chaos is actually the reality.
Now, that appearance prompted the former UKIP leader and border security expert Henry Bolton to make this challenge on Twitter. The new pin-up boy for Remainers is Simon Calder. He says we asked to be a third country and blames Dover delays on Brexit. I'll debate this with him on any TV programme that'll host it if they allocate sufficient time. Well, the gauntlet was well and truly laid down by Henry, and I'm delighted to say that Simon has taken him up on that offer right here on The Clash. But before we commence the duel, who do you agree with? Is it France or Brexit to blame for the delays at Dover? Let me know your thoughts, Dan at gbnews.uk. Email us there at gbnews on Twitter too. We've got a poll running as well. The results shortly. But Henry Bolton, your wish has been granted to debate Simon Calder. And Simon, thank you. I believe you're on a boat somewhere in Italy. Is that right? Not France?
Absolutely. I'm in the Mediterranean. I've been flying over France. I'm here in Italy. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's a wonderful thing to be able to travel. And I'm making an exception here. It's very late at night. It's very dark. I'm very much in the middle of the Mediterranean, but I could not pass up the great opportunity to talk about this in a respectful way.
Because, Simon, you remain convinced that it's all down to Brexit, these queues, even though both Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss say you're wrong?
No, I didn't ever say, and I was so interested that you said it was solely down to Brexit. No, I said it was a horrible weekend. There was a disaster. I've never seen the boss of the Port of Dover so apoplectic as he was on Friday morning when the French didn't show up. But look, forgive me, I've been covering travel for a billion years. And I've learned that it's almost always cock-up, not conspiracy. This was a cock-up on the part of the French. It did terrible things to a lot of people's holidays. It started the biggest getaway weekend since Brexit off to a really bad start. And that was the French entirely. But it wasn't because Emmanuel Macron had phoned them up and said, let's stuff it to them Brits. It was a mess up. And after that, I'm afraid... of course, things got worse. We had terrible queues at Dover. That moved to Folkestone. But basically, the problem is that we decided we wanted a frontier just like the one that the EU has with Turkey or Russia, but we wanted to put it in Kent. And that's always going to present a challenge, I'm afraid.
Henry Bolton, what do you disagree with?
Well, not a great deal, sadly, about that. I was hoping for a good sparring there, Simon. But anyway, good to see you. Look, Simon, you did write 4 days ago that actually most of this problem was caused by the French disastrously failing to staff all of their posts at Dover. And of course, that's the crux of my point. It's not down to Brexit that there were queues. In fact, I mean, I've been saying from day one, before day one, before the referendum, if the people of this country voted to leave the European Union, there were going to be massive challenges that must be prepared for, must be planned for. And initially, that didn't happen. The Cameron government didn't do it. The May government didn't do it. And in fact, created even more problems for us, perhaps. And it's only been recently that those plans and preparations have been put in place. But those included the development or the placement of additional controls, passport booths, immigration booths at Dover for the French to cater for slightly enhanced or extra timing for stamping of passports and so on. That was all prepared for. But of course, that's meaningless if the French themselves don't man those posts, as they didn't, and as you've correctly pointed out 4 days ago that they didn't. Now, the thing is then, I've heard the argument, Simon, and I think it's come from you as well, correct me if I'm wrong, but that actually, you know, in a sense that's our fault for leaving because now there's a different form of border between us and the French. It's not that much different because we weren't part of Schengen before, and you'll know that there were passport checks, even if they were slightly and incorrectly, slightly more cursory than now. But the thing is that there is a principle in border management that not only are you securing your own border, in this case the French securing the external border of the European Union, but you're also required, best practice, is to facilitate and expedite the movement of legitimate passengers and goods across the border. The French failed in that. And if we look at a UK example, if we see queues at immigration controls at Heathrow, who do we blame? We blame Border Force and the management there for failing to staff those controls. We don't blame the UK immigration laws. We don't blame sort of procedures as such.
Well, indeed, and Simon, specifically to add to that point, we have seen senior French politicians blame us and say that we need to join Schengen, the Schengen zone. We were never part of that. So what's going on, Simon?
OK, well, just a couple of points. Henry has a fine and exemplary career, and he is, this is a lot of his life's work. But crucially, the assumption was, while we were in the European Union, that anybody who had the right to be in the UK pretty much certainly had the right to be in France and the rest of the Schengen area. And that wasn't a bad expectation. Now they cannot make that. We decided as a nation we want to become third country nationals. That means, as you will know, as an absolute minimum, every passport needs to be stamped. There's a whole lot of other checks they should be doing. Have you spent more than 90 days in the last 180 days in the EU? Because if so, you're not coming in. Have you got enough money for your trip? Have you got a return ticket? These are all things that we put in place when we were members of the EU. We agreed what the rules would be. Now we're subject to them. And that means in terms of transaction time, and I actually stood there, and you'll know, Henry, of course, at Port of Dover, there's very, very little room for anything. You've got the White Cliffs, you've got the harbour, you've got the A20, you've got the A2, and they're all kind of scrunched up. So you haven't got much space.
So, Henry, how do you respond to that key point from Simon? Because that's the point that went viral, that effectively we chose third country status as a result of Brexit.
But let me give you another analogy. If there is a public event, it might be a rock concert or it might be a demonstration or a football match, and the police know it's happening, they know it's coming up, they know how many people are going to be there, they know what the movement of the march is going to be or whatever, and yet they fail to deploy sufficient resources. Who's at fault? It's the police. And in this case, the French knew perfectly well that this was going to be a particularly busy weekend. The facilities were there for them to man, and they didn't. Now, that is the problem here. It's about the management of the process.
And John Redwood says, actually, as a result of that, all of us, we should just say, no, we're not travelling to France. And that's how we should show them that they need to start treating post-Brexit Britain with some respect. And I have to say, Simon, as someone who's travelled to France a lot over the past few years, I will not be travelling there if this is the way that they continue to treat us. Am I wrong taking that position?
I think that's a valid position, but
Simon,
it's an individual one. But if I can just say, one of the things you mentioned, Dan, or I think it was Simon actually, sorry, A20, A2, M20, M2, and so on. There has been a big flaw in UK preparation for this.
OK, Henry, just going to bring Simon in for the final word. So, Simon, there is talk of this boycott. I understand it. Can you understand it?
Of course. And look, freedom, everybody. If you don't want to go to France, if you don't want to go to any of the 27 EU countries, although, of course, no border control with the Republic of Ireland, that's absolutely fine. That's your choice. I'm in favour of individual choice. Of freedom. I'm in favour of everybody having a really lovely holiday and meeting people in different countries and just enjoying the sunshine, enjoying the wine, enjoying the freedom to travel. That's
I'm very jealous, Simon,
critical.
that you are doing that right now, and I'm glad that you are. I just wish that France treat us with a bit more respect. That's the top British travel journalist, Simon Calder, and the former leader of the UKIP party, Henry Bolton. Thank you both so much. So who do you agree with? What is to blame for Dover delays, France or Brexit? From Jack on Twitter, the fact we had these delays before Brexit proves it's nothing to do with it, yet the Ramonas blame it relentlessly for anything as they have no other argument. From Martin, the UK voted to become a third country and insisted on border checks. The French are doing what we asked them to do, so he is with Simon Calder. And from Nick, blame the French tradition of heel tracking at this time of year. Air traffic will be next. Well, that is true. Any time I was in France, you would usually be impacted by some sort of labour strike. And surprise, surprise, it always seemed to happen on the weekend too. Your verdict is now in. 87% of you say that France is to blame for the Dover delays. Just 13% of you saying it is down to Brexit. Still to come, Olympic swimmer Sharron Davies' brave battle for women's rights has hit her financially, but she's not giving up the fight. She has some choice words for Stonewall after they were condemned for saying toddlers could be trans. She unpacks this latest outrage in The Outsider at 9:50. But next, teetotal Fishy Rishi has taken to imitating Nigel Farage as he tries to shake his out-of-touch billionaire image among grassroots Tories. So what does Britain's Brexit hero make of Sunak's pitiful pint parody? Our favourite Nigel, here next.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Women's rights champion Sharron Davies and ex-Mumford & Sons musician Winston Marshall still to come, but it's time now for What the Farage. He's one of the most influential political figures of our time, so I guess it's really no surprise politicians want to be just like our Nigel, but I'm not sure anyone expected to see the slick but soulless fishy Rishi Sunak imitating Britain's Brexit hero with a cringy pub photo op yesterday. The teetotal billionaire gave an unconvincing impression of the common man as he pulled pints of ale at a Cheshire pub in a wax jacket and open shirt, reminiscent of Nigel on the campaign trail. Now, experts claim he's trying to cultivate an everyman image to win back the support of grassroots Tories who see him only as the Boris backstabber. And the Farage Tribute Act continued as the Sunak camp's video promoting his immigration policy featured a special cameo from the man who knows a thing or two about the Channel migrant crisis.
Numbers of people crossing the Channel in small boats has climbed from 297 in 2018 to almost 29,000. This is completely
254 people crossed the Channel on Sunday.
So, Nigel, are you flattered by these attempts of Fishy Rishi to imitate you?
Well, first they told me leaving the European Union was completely insane, would never happen, could never happen, and now they've become the Brexit party. So that was the first little bit of success. But this is a farce. I mean, yes, they do say imitation is the highest form of flattery. But, I mean, did you see the Barber jacket he was wearing? Did you see it?
Yes.
It had never been worn before. It was clearly fresh out of the shop, probably on sale or return. You know, I mean, and the idea that he pours a pint and talks to the lads in the pub, all right, boys, how we doing? I mean, honestly, what it shows you is one very simple thing. The man is a complete and utter fraud. He is acting and saying what he needs to say to get elected, rather than actually tell us who you really are. Tell us what you're really about. But he won't do that. And they know, of course, they know that amongst Conservative Party members, that if this was an open primary and my name was in the hat, as it would be in America, both of these candidates would probably lose to me.
Yes, or if we had proportional representation as well, Nigel, it would be a very different thing. Do you think there's any way that Sunak can turn it around now with the Tory party membership? I mean, the ballots go out very, very soon.
No, I don't. I mean, even though Truss, and tonight's debate, of course, and that obviously very sad that Kate McCann fell ill and collapsed, but it's good that she's, you know, okay.
Yeah, it was horrible.
Amazing. Even Liz Truss, who at least does say one or two interesting things. I mean, not many, obviously, but one or two interesting things. But I mean, Liz Truss is asked, speak for 60 seconds, tell us why you should be the next Prime Minister. Did you watch it, Dan? I mean, I know you're a mega
No, I
Trussian.
did.
Yeah, she couldn't speak for 60 seconds without looking down and referring to her notes 4 or 5 times. And that tells you she doesn't really believe in much of what she's saying either. The one area where she was impressive, I thought, was on corporation tax. There, she looked at the camera and she knew what she was saying. But we've got, I mean, let's face it, let's be honest. Against the two of these, in personality terms, Boris is a giant. And it's just, frankly, a tragedy for him and the Conservative Party that he couldn't tell the truth. I think we've got two pretty low-grade candidates, and I think the party is in more trouble than it even begins to understand.
Yeah, look, lots to unpack there. I do think Truss had a very good night last night, actually, because I think by holding back, she exposed Sunak as a sort of schoolyard bully, and all of his interruptions and everything, I think, were a real turn-off. I actually did want to show a little tweet, Nigel, that you made about the BBC debate, actually, because it was a very good point. You said, should we congratulate the taxpayer-funded BBC for completely outdoing themselves on this debate? Not a single mention of illegal immigration or the record numbers of legal migrants either. The woke Westminster system is out of touch. I mean, it was a disgrace, Nigel, wasn't it, the topics that they chose to cover last night?
And it was held in Stoke-on-Trent. I mean, the epicentre of the Red Wall, where in poll after poll, understandably behind the cost of living crisis. Number two, and way up there, solidly number two, is illegal crossings of the Channel and the exploding population in this country. And yet, the out-of-touch BBC chose not to cover it. But you know what was even more amazing? Even more amazing. When I looked at the commentary last night and this morning, from the rest of our media, virtually nobody else even noticed the subject hadn't cropped up. And it just goes to show the BBC and many others have learnt nothing from Brexit. Literally learnt nothing. It's the same groupthink. They're totally out of touch. And I thought it was very, very disappointing. Because, I understand there is a proper debate going on about tax. And there is. There is. It's either, do we have a 1981 Conservative budget or a 1988 Conservative budget? I get that. It's a real debate. And actually, to be fair, there's a bit of passion on both sides. Sunak says we must control inflation. Truss says we must avoid a deep recession. It's a good debate. I have to say, beyond that, I can't see they differ on anything. They're both committed to net zero. They both don't have plans to deal with the cross-channel crisis. And one other thing, law and order hasn't even cropped up yet as a subject in this debate. And you look at the figures and you know what's going on in our cities. It's so bad now that people, I know in my own family, people now who are mugged or robbed don't even bother to report it.
I don't bother. And actually, I think we are going to be hearing a lot from Liz Truss on Law and Order tomorrow night. But Nigel, this is why I don't understand the decisions these Tory leadership contenders have made in terms of these debates. They went to Channel 4, that was a huge mistake. ITV let them tear each other's throats out. Actually, what they should do is come to an outlet like GB News, where we will have a fair and balanced debate on the issues that the public care about. Yes, the economy, of course, the cost of living crisis, absolutely. But also migration, as you talk about, the boat, women's rights, law and order. There is so much that needs to be discussed, Nigel. And I feel like they've played it wrong in terms of the outlets that they have chosen to go to these debates for.
But GB News is still a challenger station. All right. Now, we've been around a year and we've built a very solid, very sound footing from which we can, and I do believe we will, grow. And and against the competition, we're doing, these evening shows, we're doing remarkably well, despite the vast sums of money being spent advertising some so-called celebrities on other TV channels. But to return to the point, the Conservative Party are still so status quo in their thinking that they just do what they've always done. And it shows you a party, frankly, Dan, that is bereft of fresh ideas. Brexit was all that saved them last time round. And I do accept one thing with your analysis. There is no chance of Sunak changing. No chance whatsoever. He's absolutely in the Treasury globalist mindset. So there is at least half a chance for Truss. She might be able to do the radical things they need. But I honestly think they're headed for a disaster at the next election. And I think this contest shows you, aside from tax, there is no thought, no debate, no leadership, no originality. They're in big trouble.
Nigel Farage, fascinating analysis as ever. And of course, Nigel back tomorrow night at 7 p.m. here on GB News. And he is thrashing the opposition, let me tell you. But coming up, as the country faces yet another crippling rail strike, Liz Truss has vowed to stop Marxist union barons holding the country to ransom with a Thatcher-style crackdown. But will it be enough to derail the militant unions and stop this summer of discontent? My superstar panel returns to debate that after 10. But first, as Stonewall is condemned for suggesting children as young as 2 could be transgender, when will politicians finally stamp out the left's extremist ideology that's infecting our youth? Sharron Davies' courageous fight for women's rights has caused her financial strife, but she isn't giving up, and she has some choice words for Stonewall next.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
A first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages coming up. But first, Sharron Davies is tonight's outsider. And while she forged a stellar career battling rivals in the pool, Olympic medalist Sharron is now embarking on a gruelling fight of a different kind that I suspect she never planned for. Because of her dogged work defending women's rights against trans ideology, the swimming sensation says she's now facing financial strain for speaking out. The former swimming champ revealed in an interview for You magazine at the weekend, there's been so much hate and bullying, it's been very hard. Charities I've worked with for 30 years have dropped me. Agents I've worked with for 30 or 40 years don't use me anymore because the trans activists can be so vicious and malicious. They go after your work, after your brand, they attack everything. But proving she's made of the tough stuff, Sharron isn't willing to sacrifice her principles in the name of security. She most recently took aim at the increasingly questionable LGBT charity Stonewall for this tweet suggesting 2-year-olds, yes, that's right, 2-year-olds should be helped to recognise their trans identity at nursery. Now, Stonewall later clarified their tweet after receiving a barrage of criticism, saying it was somehow unclear. Now, my goodness, Sharron, I want to talk about your personal situation in that interview in just a moment. But first, this Stonewall tweet, I mean, this is what we're dealing with, right? It's insanity.
Hi, night, Dan. Yeah, I mean, I have a granddaughter who's 2, and all she's interested in at the moment is how excited I get when she manages to find the potty. You know, that is really as far as it goes right now. And obviously there are stacks of toys left over for my 15-year-old son, and obviously lots of little toys that we've bought for her. And she just plays with whatever's available. So it's ridiculous to say that a 2-year-old has any idea of trans ideology, you know, and to say that nurseries need to be aware of this. I just think it's outrageous. Let's just let kids be kids, you know, and stop these ridiculous stereotypes. I spent my whole youth with short hair, smelling of chlorine, playing with the boys, falling off my bike, falling off tree swings, you know, and I don't think I wore a skirt until I was about 17. So that did not make me a boy. It really didn't.
No, I couldn't agree more. And the fact that nurseries are being asked to get involved. No, leave this to the parents. But look, Sharron, your interview at the weekend was so worrying because it really does feel like this trans lobby, and by the way, it's not most trans people, and I read the whole interview and you actually made it very clear that you are friends with trans people, you have parents of, some of your friends who are parents have children who are trans, but this is about a very small section of the trans community, right? The extremists. and they want to cancel people like you. And unfortunately, we saw with Macy Gray a few weeks ago, it's starting to work, Sharron.
Yeah, well, you say it's starting to work. I think it's been working for a while. I actually think it's working less now. You know, I think the sort of things we've just been talking about and the sunlight that we're shining on sport in particular, obviously that's my area, that's what I've been talking about, but all these other things as well. You know, it's beginning to bring it to the general public. They're beginning to understand that they don't want drag time stories taught to their primary school children, you know, with people that are dressed up as if they're hookers. And this is just not appropriate. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's adult entertainment. It's not for children. And I think most people are just seeing it now. It's the sunlight, bringing the sunlight to it. So, yeah, I mean, it has been exaggerated. And I have to be really careful here and say there are a lot of people in this country that are in real dire straits at the moment. You know, the reason that I spent a lot of money was that my mum left me about £80,000 when she died. She died 4 years ago. After probate, I got it 3 years ago. And I've used all that money up to enable me to be able to fight this. This does not mean that I'm on the breadline. You know, I'm very lucky. I live in a lovely house, which is mostly paid for. And, you know, there is no chance in hell that I'm anywhere near bankruptcy. So there are people out there that are really struggling, and that's not me. But what I was saying was that because they went after agents, because they went after charities, because they tried their damnness to stop my work from coming in, it did mean that I had to use my savings or my gift from my mum to basically, you know, pay my bills.
Which is incredibly concerning because, look, Sharron, you're brave and you're passionate, but what I worry about are the folk who have the same feelings as you internally, and I'm sure you, like me, we know lots of high-profile people who will talk to us privately and say, look, you're fighting the good fight, keep doing it. But I couldn't speak out. That's what they say to me. I couldn't speak out because I would lose my presenting gig. I would lose my contract with this brand.
Yeah, and that's the sad thing, because if everybody spoke out that feels that way, this problem would get sorted out straight away. For example, this Friday, you know, the RFU are going to their members to see if they can revisit their trans policy. Now, we know if that you actually polled their athletes, their female rugby players who are in between 20 and 30% greater risk of getting injured, bearing in mind the papers are full of all the concussion stories at the moment, that they would have a resounding please no, put safety first. But they don't do that. They allow the trans lobby to emotionally blackmail them rather than putting safety and fairness first. So there is a way that we can have fairness and then work on how we come up with solutions for inclusion. Because there's nobody in sport that doesn't want everybody included, but you've got to get it in the right order, you know, and safety first, fairness, and then inclusion. And if we work together and we debate and we respectfully talk to each other, we can find solutions.
Exactly, but very often, and I'm sure you agree, it's the extreme trans lobby that are not prepared to have respectful discussion.
No, they're not, you know, and the abuse that you get online is just quite extraordinary. And if I was to use the sort of language that's used to me, I would have police turning up at my door. And that's what I have a big issue with, that there's only one side of this argument that's allowed to get away with the language and the abuse. The other side is not allowed, and nor would I want to anyway. You know, in Michelle Obama's, you know, they go low, we go high. So I'm going to carry on doing that because I believe keep putting my argument out there, keep using science, keep being respectful, and eventually, you know, we will get there. And we are getting there. You know, World Athletics are looking very strongly now, like they will follow FINA. British Triathlon in this country has, you know, and I'm very much hoping that the government, when it gets back to running itself properly after we've had all this election stuff going on, that then we can revisit how we put pressure on the governing bodies in this country to actually protect female sports people. And it's not just about fairness, it's also about sex discrimination. You know, the whole reason that we have a female classification is to exclude males so that females get equal opportunities in sport. And sport is a career where you can earn a living, a very good living. So if we're not enabling them to have those same equal opportunities as males, then that is sex discrimination. So the next course for me would be to go down that route of the legal course, you know, of sex discrimination.
Well, look, you know we're going to keep following this, Sharron, on this show. Keep fighting the good fight. Sharron Davies, tonight's Outsider. Thank you. It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, on the eve of yet another crippling rail strike, is rowdy Rishi Sunak's campaign going off the tracks?
down in 3 years.
Liz, that's simply not right. You promised almost. Well, let's just check on this, right? So we remember.
If we follow Rishi's plans, we are headed for a recession.
Can we really get an answer to this
and
question?
your own.
While Rishi talks the talk, Truss is walking the walk because she's proposed a set of Thatcher-esque policies that aim to derail the militant unions and stop Marxist barons holding the country to ransom. But does the Truss crackdown go far enough? I'll debate that next with my superstar panel, former Daily Star editor Dawn Neeson, former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and author and journalist Rebecca Reed. After a theatre in America submits to the woke mob and cancels Dave Chappelle over this joke.
But I know that trans people make up words to win arguments.
Is it time for the world's entertainers to start fighting back? Former Mumford & Sons musician turned podcaster Winston Marshall knows exactly what it's like to be the face of cancel culture, and I'll get his defence of free speech live in the studio at 10:20. Plus, after 20 years of working on BBC Radio 6 Music, legendary broadcaster Liz Kershaw claims she was sacked for being, quote, a woman over 60. So is the beep really ageist? Liz Uncancelled on that at 10:40. Is one of the UK's military fitness chiefs right to say that you cannot be fat and work in the armed forces or police? And I can't believe it's actually the end of a very long era over at Ramsay Street.
Might be leaving the street, but we're always going to be in each other's lives.
Always.
Both those stories in the media buzz at 10:30. You'll also get a first look at tomorrow's newspapers as they drop it, as ever. Brand new Greatest Britain Union Jackass before the night is out. But first, the news headlines at 10 with Bethany Elsey.
Dan, thank you. I am Bethany Elsey from the GB Newsroom. The International Monetary Fund is predicting the UK is set to have the weakest economy in the G7 next year. They expect Britain's economic growth to expand by just 0.5% due to rampant inflation. It would mean the UK would be the worst performing country among all major economies except for Russia. It's as the IMF warned that stalling growth across the world means we could be teetering on the edge of a global recession. Network Rail is advising people not to travel by train tomorrow unless absolutely necessary due to another day of strikes. More than 40,000 members of the RMT union and 14 train operators will walk out in a long-running dispute over jobs, pay and conditions. Network Rail says only 20% of services will run, and some places will have no trains at all. To minimise disruption, it's published a special timetable showing many trains will start later and finish earlier. The latest Conservative Party leadership debate between Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss came to an abrupt end this evening after a medical incident in the studio. Talk TV released a statement to say that the host of the debate, Kate McCann, fainted while on air. The broadcaster says she's fine, but that the medical advice was to not continue with the debate. People in England are being urged to use water wisely as the country faces a drought in August. The Environment Agency is warning the dry conditions have been exacerbated by record high temperatures and lower than normal rainfall so far this year. The agency is now taking precautionary measures to mitigate the impacts. And England have beaten Sweden 4-0 in the Euro 2020 semi-final. It means the Lionesses are now through to the final on Sunday at Wembley. Well, GB News reporter Ellie Costello watched the match in the fan zone at Trafalgar Square. Ellie, what was the atmosphere like?
The atmosphere was absolutely electric tonight as England scored 4 goals, Sweden 0. We are waltzing to Wembley. It's absolutely incredible here this evening. Those goals just kept on coming, and the 5,000 fans that were packed into Trafalgar Square, they were saying, is this really happening, as those goals kept on hitting the net. Beth Mead, Lucy Bronze, Alicia Russo and Fran Kirby scored goals for England tonight. Every member of that England squad came and did what they needed to do. Sweden could not come back from it. So they will be at Wembley at the final on Sunday, facing Germany or Italy. Their semi-final is tomorrow, but it could be coming home for the first time in 66 years.
Ellie, let's hope so. Thanks so much for that update. On TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Let's get back to Dan.
The first of the newspaper front pages on the way. Think they've been held up tonight because of that brilliant Lionesses victory. Go Girls. But first, let's look at tomorrow's news tonight now in our Media Buzz. Superstar panel back with me. Dawn Neeson, Sean Bailey and Rebecca Reid. Now, one thing that was clear from the debate last night is that the BBC is reluctant to talk about real campaign issues that will affect millions across the country. Instead, they focused on trivial speculation about how much Rishi Sunak's suits cost and where Liz Truss bought her bargain basement earrings. In a cringeworthy line of questioning, which even the audience showed their disapproval of in the end, Truss calmly batted away demands for her to respond to claims from Nadine Dorries that Sunak walks around in clobber worth £3,500. Watch.
Just directly and specifically, will you disown the remarks from Nadine Dorries today?
Well, I have to confess, Chris, that since this campaign started, I've deleted Twitter from my phone.
Well, we've just told you what she said.
I am not. Well, look, I didn't have any issue with how expensive anybody else's clothes are.
A very prominent supporter of yours is making very specific suggestions about the choice of clothing of your rival. And I'm asking you specifically whether you disown that.
I'm not going to give Rishi fashion advice. I mean, I've said he's a very well-dressed man. I'm not going to give him fashion advice. And I don't think, this is really the key issue in the campaign, frankly. They don't want to hear about Rishi and my fashion choices. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the people in the audience do. I don't know. They're all shaking their heads. They don't want to hear about this stuff.
It is a tone, though, isn't it, of the campaign that is being set up.
The Beeb out of touch with ordinary members of the public? Surely not. Well, here's the real news, the kind of policy commitments the electorate really care about. The runaway Truss train gained more momentum among Tory members today when she vowed to curb militant unions and put an end to the types of chaotic strikes that have plagued our summer this year. And what a timely intervention too. This evening, troublesome RNT bosses announced a new walkout on the Tube in London on August the 18th, alongside existing plans for Network Rail staff to down tools on August the 18th and 20th. That's in addition to the rail strikes that are set to disrupt millions of commuters tomorrow. In an emphatic announcement that'll have six-figure union fat cats retreating, Truss said she would introduce legislation to ensure a minimum level of service for roads, railways and gas supplies. She also wants to raise the minimum threshold of support for strike action from 40% of eligible workers to 50%, and she promised to double the notice period for industrial action to 4 weeks, as well as stop members receiving tax-free payments from their unions on strike days. Her tough-talking stance sparked nostalgia of union thrasher Margaret Thatcher, but will her crackdown go far enough? Sean Bailey, I mean, why on earth was the BBC last night talking about clothing, the cost of Sunak's suit, the cost of Truss's earrings, and not talking for one moment, by the way, about what the candidates are proposing to do to deal with all of this strike action?
Brexit. No, listen, the reason I say that...
The answer for everything.
If you look at the result from Brexit, if you look at Boris's huge majority, what it shows you is the chattering classes in London have absolutely no idea what the rest of the public, the rest of the country are thinking about. That's why they brought these issues up to you. If you're living in a lovely life in the middle of Richmond or somewhere, and then you have no financial worries, of course you're interested in suits and earrings. But if you're from somewhere like, Hackney or Scunthorpe or Hull, and you're struggling to make ends meet, you want to know what real policies are going to change your life. And that's where you see this disconnect between the chattering classes and the political class and the public.
But that's not the question the BBC was asking. The BBC was asking, does this show that the tone of this debate and the tone of this leadership campaign has gone nasty because you're swiping each other for what you're wearing? Also, the BBC didn't bring up the earrings thing. Nadine Dorries did. It's always Nadine's fault on some level. And it was her who started this.
No, but hold
the
on,
BBC is to blame. I've got no idea.
I'll tell you why the BBC is to blame. Nadine Dorries can put whatever she wants on Twitter. The BBC don't have to pick it up.
They report the news.
No,
it was news.
Twitter is not the news. No. It's not
an MP making a snipey, unimportant attack on somebody is news.
Not when we're talking about picking the next Prime Minister.
But it's not
and there are all of these issues that they
suits.
didn't cover. Grooming gangs, strike action, immigration, women's rights.
What would the point of grooming gangs be? It was grooming gangs were disgusting, they're evil, we need to do more to stop it. What else would anybody have said? That's pointless. The thing they were asking about is whether their point was this is going into a nasty sort of Donald Trump and whoever and it's going into a nasty American-style debate.
What drives the tone of this debate is not Nadine Dorries' tweet to Twitter.
It is. She started the whole conversation.
What drives the tone of the debate is what the media report report on.
Totally.
There's many
So
more
MPs should just be able to say whatever they want, and
Yes,
the
that's
BBC
their
should
job.
completely ignore it.
Yes, that's their job.
That's literally not our job as journalists.
Unless they say something substantial.
It was enough.
The earrings is not substantial.
The earrings aren't substantial. The fact that they're making comments like that is substantial.
But Dawn, the BBC could see that that Liz Truss was not interested. She didn't want to make an attack on Rishi Sunak,
she didn't.
but because they were looking
Credit to
for
her.
a gotcha moment, they pushed again and again and again, and I thought it was a disgraceful piece of television.
I agree with Sean on this. It's not what people are concerned about in this country. I don't give a monkey's what any of them wear, to be honest with you. I don't care that Rishi's got nice suits. I don't care that... Look, I mean, I thought Liz looked lovely the other night in that blue dress. Is it the most important thing about her?
No. So let's talk about her policy on the trade unions, OK? Because that's what the Daily Mail rightly put on the front page and everyone else ignored. Rebecca Reid, you don't think this crackdown on the trade unions is the right thing, even though they're threatening a summer of discontent?
Generally speaking, I think the right to strike is incredibly important. It's how we got things like maternity leave and pensions. I think when we
but what
say...
about increasing the threshold to 50% from 40%? That makes...
If you let me finish, Dan. Somebody suggested dansplaining on Twitter, which I think is
I'm just going to dansplain.
Dansplaining.
Very good idea.
I know, how good is that?
Yeah.
But
it's my show, I'm allowed.
We need a graphic for it, dansplained. Anyway, my point was, I actually, looking at what she wants to do, I think they are massively over-reporting how much she's going to crush the unions. And of all of the things that they're suggesting, I don't think 2 more weeks of notice is going to make a big difference. I do think that I would even say they should need 51% support to be able to strike, because it does make sense that more than half of the people in there should have to agree with it to do it. That seems fair. But unions are important.
So Sean, I mean, I would maybe say if Rebecca Reid doesn't think that Truss is going far enough, then maybe these policies aren't tough enough on the union.
I'd say Rebecca's right, particularly the point about 51%. But the deeper thing I think the public would be more alarmed about is just how much public money we tip into the unions. They have a thing called facility time where we pay for their staff to go and campaign and do all sorts. And that would be fine, because what a union is meant to be for, to defend workers, is one thing, but they've become political organisations, and I do not think the public should be funding political organisations. So I do think Liz will need to go further, but further in a slightly different direction. She needs to take out all of the public money that we put into unions.
Well, this is neither here nor there, is it? It's not strong. It's not actually that strong.
Dawn?
Well, it is action, and she's been seen to be doing something. I agree it should be over 50%, but then again, you also have to take into account, which no one seems to be number crunching, how many people actually bothered to vote on the strike action. In any case, an awful lot of union members. I was the member of the NUJ for decades, and I never...
Did we have them?
Well, yeah, I never bothered voting, and a lot of members don't. But I think the most important thing she said about the unions was she's going to ban members receiving tax-free cash from trade unions. So people are paid to go on strike.
Yeah,
and
that's bang out of order.
And I think that is a very important point.
But then are you saying that you think you shouldn't get paid at all if you are on strike? Because that would prevent people from being able to,
I think it makes more political, and it's losing sight of what is important with what you're striking for. I mean, my dad was a union rep. I spent most of the 70s out on strike with my dad standing on picket lines. It was lovely. I got to see my dad. But it didn't do the family any favours.
Yeah,
but so you shouldn't get paid at all when you're on strike?
Get tax-free, because the most important thing is we have very little respect for the bill payer. There's people at home who struggle to make ends meet. Somebody goes on strike and they get a tax-free payment.
Exactly.
But there's a difference between tax-free and not getting paid at all. I think you should still get paid.
But do you know what this discussion shows to me? That's actually what I would have liked to hear Sunak and Truss going head-to-head on.
But Dan, I mean, there were
last
so
night.
many things that I would... I mean, immigration is something that has been
Wasn't even mentioned, Dawn.
avoided.
Dawn, it wasn't even mentioned.
No, that's what
the channel crisis was not mentioned, and legal immigration.
So they don't get any say in the questions that there are?
No say.
The
no
people
say.
who
The BBC
organise it.
choose.
What would
the
you
BBC
ask?
choose, and the BBC choose what they think is important.
If you had them, what would your things
Well,
ask?
the things that actually, the first thing I'm desperate to ask is, do you pledge to never lock down the country again for a virus? How do we know that you can be trusted to take advice from the health authorities without destroying our livelihoods? Not one question about lockdowns, not one question about the response to COVID. And to me, that is the number one issue. There's some smaller issues I want asked to. Will you pledge to commit to scrapping the licence fee? Will you pledge to continue selling Channel 4? What are you going to do about grooming gangs? How are you going to protect women's rights and sports. I mean, for me, they are just a few of the questions that were not asked last night.
But you know what, Dan? I mean, if they are true leaders, they wouldn't wait to be asked. They would bring this subject up, and neither of them.
But it's hard to do that.
I've got to say,
it's not.
Listen,
but it's like you coming here and wanting to talk about the Lionesses and me saying, sorry, Dawn,
yeah,
no.
they'll cut you off.
Or West Ham.
No, but you could listen. As someone who's been through this process, you have to stick to the format.
How often do I talk about Taylor Swift on here? I've never been asked to, but I do.
But come on, the BBC.
There's a difference between a comment and a conversation.
Now,
I'm making a conversation, Sean.
As we all know, it's been a summer of chaos at Britain's airports as the industry struggles to recover from the COVID lockdowns. Thousands of flights have been cancelled, Brits have been stranded abroad, and airport terminals have been awash with never-ending queues of frustrated holidaymakers. And a really disgusting new TikTok trend where people pretend to be disabled to get wheelchair access has been blamed for causing even more mayhem. Watch.
Faked hurting my leg to get through security faster and onto the plane back from Ibiza. Wheelchair secured. Whole row to ourselves. Home sweet home. Time for shoes. Well, amazing spin. Off we go.
And look, then that absolute scumbag stands up at the end. This has become such an issue for the airport that even the Heathrow boss, John Holland Kay, has had to weigh in today.
Wheelchair support, we have more demand than we had before the pandemic. Now, why is that happening? Some of this is because people are using the wheelchair support to try to get fast-tracked through the airport. That is absolutely the wrong thing to be doing. We need to protect that for the people who most
What you mean
help.
some people are flagrantly abusing the rules and pretending they need that when they don't?
Absolutely. And if you go on TikTok, you'll see that is one of the travel hacks that people are recommending.
That's
Please don't do that.
That's
We need to
outrageous.
protect the service for the people who need it most.
Utterly despicable, not just to all the patient people who do the right thing, but it's also an insult to the people who genuinely need to use a wheelchair. Shame on them all. Rebecca Reid, Sean Bailey, Dawn Neeson, do stand by, because coming up in the next part of our Media Buzz, is a UK military fitness chief right to say fat soldiers and coppers in the forces are unacceptable? And is the body positivity movement actually now starting to do more harm than good? But first, after an American theatre bows to the woke mob and cancels the Dave Chappelle show over claims he's transphobic, is it time artists came together to protect freedom of expression? Former Mumford & Sons guitarist turned podcaster Winston Marshall gave up his stellar music career to fight for free speech. He's live in the studio next.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. Now, in another worrying example of cancel culture, comedian Dave Chappelle had his show canned by an American theatre after it caved into pressure from rabble-rousing lefties. Chappelle has been under attack from the woke mob since last year after he made this joke in his Emmy-nominated Netflix special, The Closer.
And they've cancelled people that are more powerful than me. They canceled J.K. Rowling. My God, J.K. Rowling wrote all the Harry Potter books by herself. She sold so many books, the Bible worries about her. And they canceled her because she said in an interview, and this is not exactly what she said, but effectually, she said gender was a fact. And then the trans community got mad. They started calling her a TERF. I didn't even know what that was. But I know that trans people make up words to win arguments.
The perpetually offended Liberals branded Chappelle transphobic for that joke, despite the comedian taking aim at a wide range of people during his set. And last week, a protest that garnered just 125 signatures, 125, was enough to bully the First Avenue Theatre in Minneapolis into cancelling the comics gig. In a grovelling and I actually think pathetic statement, they said to staff, artists in our community, we hear you and we are sorry. We know we must hold ourselves to the highest possible standards and we know we've let you down. But all is not lost, because there's a fight back taking place in the entertainment industry led by the former Mumford & Sons musician Winston Marshall. In March 2021, Winston felt the full force of cancel culture after he was hounded online for praising a book investigating Antifa, written by Andy No. But a sensational and rather inspiring move, he chose to quit one of the biggest bands in the world so that he could continue to speak about politics freely without harming his fellow bandmates. And I'm delighted to say Winston joins me for one of those unfiltered conversations now. Winston Marshall, great to have you here. I just wonder, is there a pushback happening in the entertainment industry? Because obviously we do have folk like you, Dave Chappelle, Ricky Gervais. You know, there are some high-profile examples of people who are fighting back. But the fact that this Minneapolis theatre cancelled the gig of one of the biggest comedians in the world because of 125 people on a petition, that really worries me.
Yeah, I was going to challenge that part of your introduction.
Oh, good, go on.
I'm not sure it feels like that to me, that there's much of a pushback. But actually, well, for example, Dave Chappelle doesn't seem to care and he marches on. He was cancelled from First Avenue, the famous venue where Prince filmed Purple Rain. I've played there myself. In fact, he even has a plaque on the wall that they put up for him, Dave Chappelle, at First Avenue, and now they've kind of thrown him under the bus like this. But I actually think there is a bit of a pushback. Bill Burr's got a Netflix special at the moment, and it pretty much ridicules cancel culture throughout. We have top comedians like John Cleese ridiculing cancel culture.
Bill Maher, he's been great.
Exactly, and so. In one sense, you feel like there is a pushback, but look at the ground and look what's actually happening. It's a little bit more worrying. On my interview show, I interviewed a really inspiring woman named Rosie Kay this week, who...
this is Marshall Matters, your podcast, which you can get via the Spectator platforms, right?
That's exactly right. And I'm interviewing people in the creative industries looking at freedom of expression. And she is British, and last year she was cancelled from, or she was forced to resign from her dance company, which was called the Rosie Kay Dance Company, which she'd been running for 17 years because she wanted to put on a production, or a dance production, of Virginia Woolf's Orlando, where the central protagonist, about halfway through the story, turns from a man into a woman. But this, when it was written, the idea of trans was just not, it couldn't possibly have been in Virginia Woolf's mind. Now, she was forced to resign, but she is showing real pluck and courage now, setting up a new company, wanting to put on this production now. And so there are stories of people who go through this hellish experience. And it is, for artists, quite hellish. I think politicians are probably used to getting flack and used to getting criticised, and it's by nature they're either loved or hated, or usually just hated. But musicians, artists aren't used to that experience. So for them, it's very traumatising.
And it's not part of the day job.
It's not part of the day job at all. It is part of the day job to challenge people. It is part of the day job to try and make them think. And so with Rosie and her production, she was intentional about choosing things which are going to make us think about these problems that we as a society are thinking about in different ways.
And I guess the examples that we've spoken about, you don't really have musicians, your peers speaking out. So we see it in comedy, and part of that is because, of course, in comedy, you have to get up, you have to perform a set, and so sometimes that material is going to be controversial. I guess if you're a musician, you don't necessarily have to express your views increasingly, and I know this as someone who used to interview a lot of musicians, increasingly musicians are choosing not to give interviews. I've spoken to people like Ed Sheeran about this, that they think soon musicians will just be too scared to give any interviews because they know that one line can be extrapolated and used on the internet to try and cancel them. So is your message to, I guess, your peers to speak up more, or can you understand why they're so terrified sometimes?
I don't think people really care, particularly when it comes to an election, about what actors and musicians think that they should vote for.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Having said that, short of telling people how to vote, discussing the issues, I think, is fine. They're parts of society just as much as anyone else.
Yeah, they don't want to be preached to, but I think when it comes to culture, culture is absolutely set by celebrity. And if we're only hearing one set of arguments from celebrity, which tend to be, the very woke, the very liberal arguments, then that does help to set a culture.
Well, actually, a lot of these musicians, they will happily on stage talk politics at length sometimes, but those are progressive politics that usually aren't going to get them into trouble. So they might say F Trump or rally against Israel.
Or Roe v. Wade, for example.
Well, exactly, and those aren't issues that...
That's acceptable because it's what the MSM and the liberal elite believe.
Or even creative industries on whole are progressives. Even those getting cancelled now are progressives. Dave Chappelle's a progressive. I'm a liberal. Rosie Kay, again, she comes from the left. This world, it's not got conservatives, particularly in it. I mean, there are some conservatives, but generally not many.
But it's the type of issues, isn't it? It's social issues where if you go against the grain, you risk, and you prove it, this is the problem, you prove it, you risk cancellation. Obviously, you've turned that quote-unquote cancellation. I guess you could argue you cancelled yourself from Mumford & Sons. You chose to leave. But do we need more artists to be brave, to have the discussion, and then all of a sudden it doesn't become such a big deal?
I think the courage shown by people like Dave Chappelle, who plough on, OK, you're not going to have me on at this venue, I'll go down the road. That's the courage. And that's the example, and those are the role models we need.
Yeah, and also, by the way, I would praise Netflix too, because they went through a period where they lost a lot of subscribers, and a lot of people said it was because they were pushing a particular woke narrative. But it would have been very easy for Netflix to cancel Dave Chappelle too. There was that massive uprising from their employers, and they held firm. So I think we also need to see more corporations. For example, the publishing company behind J.K. Rowling. Now, you could argue they have huge financial motivation to support J.K. Rowling, but they did. And so look, maybe I am too optimistic, maybe I am, but I hope that folk like you, like J.K. Rowling, like Dave Chappelle, like Ricky Gervais, I hope it does indicate there is some sort of shift in culture happening away from cancel culture. I may be naive, though. I accept that.
I think you're right that where before there was a big pushback of people, let's say, protesting the ideas or the wrong ideas, wrong think. Now, major companies realise that if they cancel someone, they're going to have major pushback because actually the silent majority, or a lot of people, are fed up with this attitude and this philosophy that's infiltrated so many institutions. and they will stand up. And if Netflix takes someone down, people will be like, you know what?
Exactly,
I'm done
because
with
we just
Netflix.
won't buy our Ben and Jerry's, we just won't subscribe to Disney+. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Exactly.
Winston Marshall, fascinating conversation. Thank you so much. And I am a huge fan of your Spectator podcast, Marshall Matters, which you can go and download now, but just make sure you don't listen until 11 o'clock tonight after my show. Winston Marshall, thank you so much. But coming up, is the BBC ageist and sexist? Well, former Radio 6 DJ Liz Kershaw has hit out at the corporation for dumping her after 35 years and claiming they want to erase any woman over 60 from the airwaves. She's uncancelled and fighting back at 10:40. But next, is a UK military fitness chief right that it's unacceptable for soldiers and coppers to be fat? My superstar panel will discuss that and more in the Media Buzz too, plus a first look. We've got the newspaper front pages in. They feature, of course, the Lioness victory, so we'll show them too.
We are GB News. We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Now, we're back with the Media Buzz, and it's time for tomorrow's News Tonight. Lots of front pages in our first of the evening, of course, covering the fantastic successes of our Lionesses as they progress to the Euros final at Wembley on Sunday. Congratulations. Above that, rail and tube strikes hell as unions join forces for maximum misery, revealing 2 more train strikes during August. The Guardian also celebrates England putting 4 goals past Sweden to reach the Euros final. Also, the head of Parliament spending watchdog has accused ministers of playing fast and loose with £770 million in COVID contracts during the pandemic. The Daily Telegraph leads, The Sun, which leads on the Lionesses too. Now, bring on Germany or France at Wembley, they say. I think we have the Daily Telegraph now, which leads on Sunak's screeching U-turn on tax cuts, pledging to scrap VAT on energy bills as he trails Liz Truss in the polls. Too late, I would say, Rishi, too little, too late. The Daily Express leads with Truss laying down the law as the Tory frontrunner demands police cut crime by 20%. Her back-to-basics law and order package promises every burglary victim will be visited by an officer. That's so important. And then we move to the Eyes front page, which covers this evening's Tory debate, saying that Sunak is on the ropes. The latest points show that Sunak is struggling to make inroads into Truss's support among Tory members. More on the Media Buzz now with tonight's superstar panel, former editor, current columnist at the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, the Conservative politician, Shaun Bailey, and the author and journalist, Rebecca Reid. A British Army fitness instructor has said it's not acceptable for soldiers to be fat and condemned the body positivity movement for promoting obesity and damaging the mental health of recruits. Lance Sergeant Farron Morgan claimed young men and women are bombarded with messaging telling them to embrace their bodies, but believes that's bad for society and the military. He said young recruits see these body positive images in the media promoting an unhealthy lifestyle, while celebrities say it's OK to eat what you want as long as you're happy. That's wrong. Being overweight puts more stress on the NHS, and if this trend becomes a widespread way of thinking among young recruits, you will be knocked off the operational effectiveness of the army. I think we're scared to see what's going on and deal with it. Now, his intervention comes as the Nuffield Health poll of 8,000 women suggested almost half have done no vigorous exercise in the past 12 months. The body positive movement, which has seen plus-sized women put on the cover of prominent magazines like Cosmopolitan, has been criticised for ignoring the health risks associated with being overweight. Critics also argue it perpetuates a focus on people's appearance. So, Dawn Neeson, sometimes I jokingly describe you as a bit of a body fascist.
Yes, you do, funny enough, and you're not joking either, are you? Because I possibly am.
Presume you love this Sergeant Major saying you've got to be skinny and you've got to eat those, macrobiotic salad bowls that you love.
I don't think you've got to be skinny, I think you've got to be healthy.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with this. I think, you know, once upon a time, it used to be actually a disciplinary action if you weren't fit enough to be in the forces. And now anything goes. Look, you can be overweight and you can be fit, provided you can pass the fitness tests and do your job, then that's fine. However, I do have an issue with this constantly promoting obesity as acceptable. It is not, Dan. It is a killer. It's almost as much of a killer as cancer. So we don't celebrate cancer, so why are we celebrating something that
Rebecca Reid, why do we celebrate this body positivity?
There's so many things to say. Overweight and obese are very different things. Overweight people have the longest lifespans of any demographic. Being overweight can also be, you can be fit. If you can pass the fitness test in the army, carry on. If you can't, then you can't be in the army. Same with a copper. A really major...
So it doesn't matter what your weight
No, it doesn't matter what weight is. If you can do all the running and lifting, do it.
Okay.
And if you can't, then you can't be in the army.
You'd accept that you have to pass
obviously, if you are 42 stone and you can't move, different role in the army, frightening people, I don't know. But generally speaking, you have to be fit, not thin. But and one thing I would say is my issue with this isn't that. I think that's sensible from him. The body positivity movement is not to blame for this. Nobody wants to be fat. Nobody aspires to be fat. It's a way of getting people to hate themselves less. And a major Scandinavian study found that the number one thing that makes people lose weight and keep it off is liking themselves and feeling OK about themselves. If you make people feel terrible about themselves, they put more weight on. They don't lose weight. You can't fat shame people into getting thin.
But I agree with that, actually. But, Shaun Bailey, you say that the society we live in today, people's feelings are now considered more important than their behaviour.
And this is the point, isn't it? We all know that the army is literally life and death, and all the police also operate in very hazardous circumstances a lot of the time. So you have to set these fitness levels so that it can actually function. It needs to be performance above feelings. That's the issue. And when you talk about body positive, of course you mustn't make people feel bad, but there's a balance here, and there's an idea that we're drifting off too far one way. And I think a lot of these magazines are absolute hypocrites. They've spent 20 and 30 and 40 years pushing, you know, that heroin chic look down our necks, and all of a sudden, because of, you know, anything to do with looking cool, they've gone the other way.
Not
I think
cool.
we need to have a conversation.
What about the Lizzo look?
I've worked in women's magazines extensively. It's not about looking cool. It's a step change. We went too far with the anorexia promotion, and I don't think it's gone too far, because I don't think a single person looks at Tess Holliday on the cover of Cosmo and thought, I'd like to weigh 24 stone. Nobody wants that. It's not aspirational. It's taking the hatred out of it. Lizzo can play the jazz flute and dance and sing at the same time. Her fitness is incredible.
I'll tell you why I disagree, because the whole thing about those magazines is inspirational. You buy those magazines to learn, to be inspired, to go forward. No, but if you listen, this isn't about are you fat or not. This is about magazines normalising things. If you normalise something, then you encourage people in that direction.
But if that were true, people would be wanting to get fatter. People are getting fatter because they can't cook, we have poor education, we have a convenience culture, we don't have any good nutrition, we don't have good access to exercise, we work too long, too many hours.
That's not true. We know more now about food than we've ever known. So that education
Your average person cannot cook.
I'm sorry,
in this
that
country.
education.
People in this country cannot cook.
That's not the point. It's about what you eat, not what you cook.
Fascinating discussion. Well, look, we will continue it. But finally, if you've never seen Aussie TV favourite Neighbours, just imagine a Coronation Street down under with sun, sea and plenty of explosive rowing. But crucially, not a cobblestone in sight. Sadly for some, the last ever episode is aired in the UK on Friday as the legendary series waves goodbye after 37 years. Now, Russell Crowe, Margaret Robbie, Kylie Minogue and Jason Donovan all kicked off their glittering careers on the show, which brought a searing dose of Aussie soap drama to our rainy island for nearly 4 decades. And speaking of Kylie and Jason, fans should be so lucky. The pair are returning for the epic finale as the show's iconic lovebirds, Charlene and Scott. Here's a sneak peek.
It certainly feels like the end of an era. It all goes so quickly.
Seeing him again, it was like no time had passed at all.
Yeah, there's lots of old faces floating about. Do you think Farage still loves me?
Your story, my story. I wanted a reason to come back.
The street is not going to be the same without you.
This is going to be a great new start.
Where are you moving to?
I don't really know.
We might be leaving the street, but we're always going to be in each other's lives.
Always.
Truly is the end of an era. Rebecca Reed, Sean Bailey, Dawn Neeson, do stand by because coming up, my superstar panel nominate for tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. But next and Uncancelled is the BBC ageist and sexist. Former Radio 6 DJ Liz Kershaw hits out at the corporation for dumping her after 35 years. Outrageous. Before that, though, quick look at what's coming up in tomorrow's show. Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, the distinguished economist Patrick Minford influenced Margaret Thatcher's revolutionary policies over 30 years ago, and today he's still being cited by aspiring PM Liz Truss. In an exclusive interview, he joins me to explain why we need to ignore the lefty establishment's scaremongering and crack on with cutting tax. Plus, would Prime Minister Truss be the Ramona's worst nightmare? Former MEP and Spectator columnist Patrick O'Flynn gives his take on the race for number 10. And my superstar panel round up the headlines of the day. Top Daily Mail columnist Amanda Platel, entrepreneur and activist Adam Brooks, and broadcaster Ashley James. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GBNews. But it's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. Now, you only need to watch an episode of EastEnders these days to know that often someone can be just a little too white, too straight or too old to stay among the BBC ranks. Sue Barker was infamously axed as host of A Question of Sport last year amid claims she was getting on, while the corporation has faced fresh ageism claims for ordering legendary Radio 2 presenter Steve Wright to leave at the end of September. Now, though, another radio veteran, BBC Six music star Liz Kershaw, has taken aim at the Beeb for cutting short her own 35-year glittering career. Liz, who left Six Music in March this year after being on every BBC radio station, Radio 1, Radio 2, Radio 4, has sensationally accused station chiefs of sacking her because she's over 60. The 63-year-old's last major project for Six Music was a 16-part Legends in Their Own Lunchtime series, where she chatted to icons like Debbie Harry and Boy George, and she was landing good ratings for the station too, record ratings actually. So Liz's case echoes that of BBC presenter Miriam O'Reilly, then 53, who won a case for age discrimination against the corporation in 2011 after she was dropped from its flagship rural affairs show Countryfile. I'm delighted that Liz, who features regularly here on GB News at breakfast time with the brilliant Eamon and Isabel, joins me at the other end of the day. So, Liz Kershaw, I could not understand when the BBC made this decision. You have been a veteran across all of their stations, but you became synonymous with Six Music. Your ratings were incredibly strong. So for you, this feels like a straight-up case of ageism.
Well, nobody actually said to me. Hiya, Dan, by the way. It's really nice
Hello.
to meet you.
Great to speak.
I'll be back on Thursday morning at 6 o'clock.
Excellent. I'll be watching.
I don't often sit at home with my makeup on, dressed at this time. Anyway, nobody's ever said to me, oh, Liz, you're going because you're old. But I did get the vibes before they did cancel me that I was kind of seen as a bit of a dinosaur by the new management. And that manifests itself in kind of, sneering, snidey remarks, sort of hints that the kind of guests you're getting on, even though I had a big feature on my live show and I did the series Legends. They're legends because they've been around a bit. They haven't made one hit album. Boris said, I got the vibe like she likes old guys with guitars. Which I do, but I love all kinds of music. I always have, but there was that vibe. And then we got a new boss, and she'd been promoted up. She was already there. And I just knew my face didn't fit. And then she just called me in after the biggest ratings I'd ever had. And I was mentioning dispatches around the buildings, management, record figures for Liz Kershaw. She called me and she said she wanted to catch up. And a coffee. I thought she was going to congratulate me. And she said she didn't want my show anymore. She wouldn't give a reason. She just wanted to make changes. So I just looked around and thought, there aren't now any women my age. I was the oldest, I was the oldest woman on Six Music. I've been there since day one. I'm not saying it's a job for life. You do have to refresh things and you do have to encourage younger talent, else I'd never have got on Radio 1 in the late 80s. But I just look round now and I see that on Six Music, Radio 1, 1 Extra, Radio 2, which come under the umbrella of the BBC's pop stations, there are 2 women over 60. And one is Elaine Page, who does a specialist show on Sunday on Radio 2, musical theatre. And the other one is Anne Nightingale, who was the first ever female DJ on UK pop radio. And she records her show and it goes out at 2:00 in the morning. It's an hour long. And they keep Annie there. And I'm glad. But other than that, on 4 networks, each broadcasting for 168 hours a week, 24/7, there are 2 women producing maximum of 4 hours radio over the age of 60. Look round further and you'll see it's not the case with the guys. No. Yes, Steve Wright's gone for lots of reasons, and he's gone with great dignity. But if you look round, there are guys in their late 70s. I'm loath to name names because that's not personal to them.
No, but we know who you mean. We know who you mean. But
people like Johnny Walker, Paul Gambaccini, Tony Blackburn, it's quite okay for the guys to go on in perpetuity. And also there's a precedent because I was told I was no longer required when just after my 62nd birthday. Same thing happened to Janice Long. In 2017, Janice happened to be 62 when, after doing night shifts on Radio 2 since 1999, she was told she was no longer required, and she was 62. So I just look around and think, what's going on? And then I look at the rest of the BBC news. There isn't a female newsreader over 60. No. They've got Kirsty Walk on Newsnight, but she's about to be replaced by Victoria Derbyshire.
Presenter, yeah.
It's just, to me, it's just so evident. But it's not just, you've been talking earlier about music and musicians. It's not just about me. In fact, it's not about me at all, because I'm quite happy. I'm quite happy to be out of that place, because now I can express my views.
Yes.
Without getting sinister phone calls all out the day from the management.
You don't want to be there, Liz. But look, I really understand the point that you're making, though, and I think it is disgraceful of the BBC, and I'll tell you why. I've been on this story now for close to a decade, and there has been time after time where the BBC has been told by their various different management structures, it's the Trust or the board or Ofcom, whoever it is, you have to retain older female talent. They were told in the newsroom. They were told after the Miriam O'Reilly case. They were told after what happened on the radio. And they don't listen because they are obsessed. And the Sue Barker thing is a disgrace. I mean, they've let their most popular sports presenter walk out the door. But to me, it is because they have an obsession with youth.
Well, they do, and they seem to think that they seem to think that people listen to music. They choose music by the age of the artist, which is complete baloney. My sons listen to stuff from the 60s right through to the present day. When I was a kid, I listened to everything on Radio 1. I loved the charts. But I also loved big band music, Duke Ellington. I loved the crooners like Frank Sinatra. I really love the Andrews Sisters. I love music from the 1920s, Cole Porter and stuff like that. And also growing up, I never said to myself, I can't listen to John Peel because he's in his late 50s. You know, it just didn't occur to me. But
exactly, give young people some more credit.
Well, the thing is that and the other thing is you're throwing everything away, because all the knowledge that somebody like myself has built up about music. Somebody said to me the other day, "How do you know that?" I said, "Because I'm kind of encyclopedic about music. I just love it, as well as enjoying the emotions it brings." But all that knowledge is just not valued. All the interviews I've done, people will never be interviewed again, but have contributed so much to music and are just lost in the bowels of the BBC in the archive. And it seems like a shame to me, and it doesn't seem like a service to the licence player. Yes, you've got to have young, fresh talent, but don't discriminate. What happened, Dan, the other thing, I don't know if you picked up on this, was that the BBC appointed June Sarpong on £180,000 a year for a few hours a week. And she was the diversity czar, and she set targets for diversity. And one of the targets was that, and I'm really sticking my neck out saying this, but it was in the public domain. One of the targets was that 25% of on-air presenters and guests had to be non-white. And I was actually towards the end of my stint, 20-year stint on 60 Music, being told that I couldn't have a certain guest because I hadn't filled the quota of black people. And I think that's wrong.
Yeah, it's totally wrong. It's totally wrong. And this is how the BBC operates.
Why are we having this guest? Has he got a new album? What's he doing? What's the peg? Yeah. No, it wasn't about that at all. And I just think, and also, in order to introduce quotas, you've got to push aside people that are there, and you push it the easiest door.
Well, look, Liz Kershaw, do you know what I say, though? Thank goodness you're out now. You've got a new lease of life. You're with us at GB News. You can say what you think, and I think it is the BBC's loss. And, of course, Liz Kershaw will be back on Breakfast here at GB News. Thursday morning, Liz? Thursday morning, that's right.
Thursday morning. I'm back soon with a music podcast as well. Everybody does a podcast now, don't they?
Yeah, but we want yours. We want yours. So Liz Kershaw, and do come back with me too. We'll have you back soon, Liz Kershaw.
I'd like Mumford and Sons. I just want to say this: they won't get airplay now. They just won't. But bands, lads in bands practicing in garages in Leicester, they don't get on the playlists anymore, and that is subduing our
absolutely.
Culture.
Liz Kershaw, I could speak to you all day, but thank you so much. A spokesperson for the BBC, because, of course, we get both sides of the story here on GB News. All radio schedules evolve over time, and after 16 episodes of Liz Kershaw's Legend in their own lunchtime in a year, we wanted to explore other music stories. There were no other factors involved in the decision. We are proud to have a diverse range of presenters on TV and radio. Union Jackass Greatest Britain time now. Dawn Neeson, your Greatest Britain nominee.
It's coming home, Dan. England's women's football team through to the final of the Euro 2022, Wembley on Sunday. Bring on Germany or France.
Sean Bailey, your nominee.
Tony Sewell done a lot of work to get disadvantaged kids into university. He's been honoured by Buckingham University, which is great, because Nottingham University bowed to pressure from woke activists and removed his honour.
And Rebecca Reid, your nominee.
Sam Fender, who won Eurovision, because while it's very sad it can't be in the Ukraine, it's going to be here.
Sam Ryder. You're not a fan.
I'm so sorry.
Sean, I'm going for Sean. Tony Sewell, that was a complete outrage that he didn't get that initial honorary degree. Union Jackass time now. Dawn Neeson, your nominee.
Oh, Rishi Sunak for everything we've said tonight.
Sean Bailey, your nominee.
The Ataturk Trust, which is a trust that's put posters all over London saying straight white men give back the power. This is wrong. It's pushing social division and racial division, and they've been given £3 million in government money. Terrible.
That's completely outrageous. I want to talk about that on tomorrow night's show, actually. And Rebecca Reid, your Union Jackass.
The owner of a very lovely £6,000 pair of earrings, Nadine Dorries.
Oh, you always go for Nadine.
I know, but this time it's really fair.
Well, do you know what? I'm actually going to go for Dawn Neeson and Rishi Sunak as today's Union Jackass, simply because of the way he spoke to Liz Truss in that debate last night. I think it revealed his true colours, if I'm completely honest. Rebecca Reid, Dawn Neeson, Sean Bailey, thank you so much for being an absolutely fantastic superstar panel this Tuesday night. I'm, of course, back again tomorrow night from 9 p.m. Headline is up next, though. Good night.
Hi there. I'm Ada McGiven from the Met Office. After a relatively cloudy day in many places, there'll be an increased chance of clear spells developing overnight, and under those clear skies it will feel cool. Still 1 or 2 showers around as we end the day and go into Wednesday, but on the whole, high pressure is building in from the west, and that means winds are lighter and skies are getting clearer compared with earlier in the week. So actually, the best of the clear spells